Yeah, absolutely. So T&M, time and materials work, happens for a variety of reasons on construction projects. I mean, straight away, important to mention that some projects are executed in their entirety on a T&M basis. They're often in sort of complex industrial settings where the scope, schedule, or current conditions are unclear, and the work just needs to be executed on a T&M basis because people aren't going to bid that work lump sum. And that's not really what we're talking about today. T&M often occurs on more traditional construction projects and usually as a result of what they call directed changes. And so actually to kind of dig into this, it's sort of necessary to go back and talk a little bit about how changes to a construction contract get executed to really understand the genesis of T&M. So a contract change usually happens in one of two ways. They can be negotiated changes, where a GC and a subcontractor will work collectively to execute a change in the contract based on an RFI or a design change or whatever it may be. And those changes get incorporated, but no work happens until such time as that change order is affected and included in the contract. The challenge with that is it can take quite a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And so often there's a requirement for a subcontractor to just get on and do the work. And there's a mechanism within most construction contracts called field directed changes clause, or some derivative thereof, that essentially allows the general contractor or owner to direct a subcontractor to do work on an at-risk basis, where essentially they are doing the work and they will get paid at some point in the future. And that work is executed on a time and material basis. And that work is usually tracked on T&M slips, which outline the resources used in the execution of the work: labor, equipment, materials, subcontractors. And they're usually tracked in a pretty detailed way, right? Sometimes the names of the people on certain types of projects, certain public sector agencies and certified payroll projects need the names of the employees. So it's essentially a duplicate time card in some respects. Equipment, materials, subcontractors, expenses, invoices, all that sort of stuff. It all has to come together. But ultimately, it's all digitized, or sorry, it's not digitized, captured by the foreman in the field, on these little T&M slips. And those T&M slips are sort of collated, they're priced, reviewed, approved, and ultimately they get included in a change order at some point in the future that incorporates into the contract all of the resources that were spent in the past. And then the subcontractors can ultimately get paid. And loads of challenges in the workflow in general, that we'll talk about a bit more. Whether it's an issue of efficiency or administrative burden or the lack of data or time and cost of recovery. T&M is just absolutely one of those workflows that is ripe for digitization and improvement in the industry. And for a long time, it just hasn't been. You really haven't seen a great deal of opportunity for people to improve on that process. And that's really what we're here to talk about today.
Absolutely. So kind of expanding upon what Guy was saying, the fact that T&M remains predominantly paper-based, gives rise to a ton of challenges. To begin, the T&M tickets themselves are often recorded in triplicate carbon copy books. So one copy goes to the GC, another copy goes to the subcontractor management. Automatically you have two groups looking to process and access the data, which in these days of collaboration and timely access to information insights, that process of these triplicate carbon copies it's just awful. Things that kind of stand out to me and, what we hear in talking to customers, T&M tickets are often lost. That's just the nature of it when they're these triplicate copies. So we often hear of a stash of tickets showing up at the end of a job during closeout, long after they should have been processed. We hear of foremen having to drive from job site, back to the home office to drop off slips for processing. There are countless other delays that can occur in getting tickets back to the office, which in turn, these delays then delay the subcontractor ultimately getting paid to execute the work, which is the end goal there. Invariably, the data has to be transferred from the paper tickets to Excel or some other solution for pricing. So there's a lot of, hands that are touching this process. It's manual, it's getting into something else. So usually that data, has to be shared and exchanged with other stakeholders. Maybe that's by email or in a project management system. So
Yeah.
you can see just in terms of this workflow, how it's typically done, there's a lot of opportunity for data loss, for errors, or just wasted administrative effort, when the data moves between all these systems. So I think in general, Tyler, when you think about how seamless, many construction workflows have become with modern tools like Rhumbix, T&M remains kind of in the dark ages for most construction companies. Those are things that kind of stand out to me just in conversations we had. But, Guy, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, you absolutely hit on some of the key points. I mean, for me, T&M really is one of the worst examples of how sort of long established, long accepted practices in the construction industry can set sort of projects and the companies that execute them up for failure, candidly.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about the fact that a subcontractor is executing work on a T&M basis, is doing so essentially at risk, they're floating the cost of the work. And that's kind of how construction subcontractors are set up to be paid. But at least when they execute on the scope of work, the original contractor's scope of work, they know what that's going to cost. They know how much money they need to secure. They know the resources that are going to be required to execute that, and they can account for it accordingly. But T&M essentially gives the general contractor and the project the ability to stretch that out, both in terms of time and resources and expenditure. And that's money that the subcontractors are essentially floating in terms of supporting the project costs. And as such, we believe that the construction industry should be hyper-focused on making sure that that work is really measured, documented, and easily processed for payment. And it's super important because if you consider the fact that things like those key financial metrics like cost of working capital, return on capital employed, how much margin a company makes based on the capital that it implements. Construction companies have a boatload of money tied up in T&M tickets, just sitting there waiting to get processed. And it's kind of crazy. And particularly, in the current economic conditions, right? Costs of capital have increased substantially. You've got material costs going through the roof. Cash flow is king for subcontractors. And T&M can potentially just add insult to injury, right? It's already a challenging market for a lot of subs who typically pretty poorly capitalized anyway. So we just genuinely believe it's one of those workflows that is absolutely ripe for automation. And we're pretty passionate about the idea that, improving some of the back end financial operating conditions for construction companies can deliver and free up a lot of opportunity to innovate and to digitize and pursue other opportunities. And it's really non-value added stuff like T&M that is holding the industry back. And so, for subcontractors where the costs of borrowing are disproportionately high, it's absolutely one of those workflows that we should all be working very aggressively to try and improve. We've had T&M in the platform for a while, and I was pretty involved in the development of it way back in the day with folks at Hensel Phelps and my good friend Andrew Cameron. We've seen excellent results from subcontractors and GCs that have deployed the platform and used it to, mitigate the impacts of this process to streamline the workflow. But over the years, and actually looking at trends in the industry as well, we've observed and been told, frankly, by our customers that they want more from the workflow. And candidly, what the construction industry is really driving at is more coherent, complete, integrated end-to-end workflows, right? They don't want to digitize just this bit in the middle and have manual bits on either end, right? And that's just integrations, data flows between PM tools and ERPs and all that sort of stuff is just very consistently a trend that we've heard. The construction industry has just innovated so much over the course of the last 10 years from, going from digital workflows, from paper-based workflows 10 years ago for an awful lot of things, to now demanding of their suppliers and vendors, fully integrated workflows that are digital at the source, integrated into the systems of record, have data flowing seamlessly, the ability to build analytics off the back end. I mean, the construction industry has long been parroted as this industry that is super set in its ways and really antiquated. Well, 10 years ago, we didn't do a lot of this. And 10 years now, it's a completely different paradigm. And so we're really responding to that. I mean, Greg, you must be that's really a big change in the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So really what we're doing is we're responding to that with the back of the T&M platform. And so our customers are looking for a more complete end-to-end solution. So what does that mean? They want T&M tickets to be initiated in a way that supports lifecycle tracking. So they want to be able to initiate the T&M workflow out of their PM tools or their ERP tools with cost event numbers, not to exceed amounts. When a event happens that might result in T&M, the ability to track that in their systems of record, flow that through the field solutions that are digitizing the T&M tickets, and have everything flowing back to that single source of truth so that they're connected on the front end and the back end. So it's all about integrations with ERPs, integrations with PM tools, so that the field data ties back to their financial records. They want T&M tickets to be priced, right? We see some of the newer solutions that are out there in the market, mentioning no names, they don't price the T&M tickets. The T&M ticket comes out and it's just got resources utilized. And someone has to sit there and say, well, that person is $50 an hour, that piece of equipment is $12 an hour, and go through and every single line item cost it. Our platform will just go through and say, these are the resources you spent. These are the costs that you've assigned for that particular project. That ticket's worth $100. Well, that ticket's worth $10,000. We've seen T&M tickets that are $20,000, $30,000 in terms of the resources that they capture. Wow. And they're 2-3 months old, right? And that's just boatload of money sitting there, not doing work for the subcontractors. And they want more integrated workflows, right? They want tickets to flow seamlessly between stakeholders with reviews, approvals, audits, edits, document management, etc. So our platform has done a lot of that. We've obviously enhanced the workflows over the years, but that's really where the T&M process fundamentally needs to innovate and digitize in that space. But what we've changed recently is, companies are looking at these big sort of thematic areas in the industry and trying to work out how to improve them. And change management is really one of those big ticket items that people are looking to try and improve upon. And what we've been building out is the ability to improve the way in which T&M tickets flow from the field through the office-based workflows, reviews, approvals between different stakeholders, between the GCs and the subcontractors. That integrates that collaboration, integrates that single source of truth, one place that everyone has insight into that data, but ultimately flow that into the change order process. So how do you take T&M tickets and flow them into change orders? How do you convert the T&M tickets into something the subcontractors can ultimately invoice against and get paid? So how do you convert paper to digital, to insights, into value, and ultimately money, right? And shortening the process by which that happens into the most streamlined, coherent, convenient workflow that there possibly is. And that's really the big focus for Rhumbix.
Kind of going back to the manual process we typically see. T&M is one of those workflows that just hasn't been well addressed, by even some of the more established, PM, CM solutions. They just don't necessarily have a good, or in most cases, any solutions for helping folks manage this. And that's where we're looking to help. Our focus at Rhumbix, has been to create a system where T&M tickets flow seamlessly between the sub and the GC. And this includes reviews, edits, and approvals, all in a single workflow, kind of expanding upon what Guy said. It's a more of an end-to-end solution that is not these disparate kind of processes. So, once the T&M tickets are good to go, however, they need to get converted into something that can be presented to the GC. And this is usually in the way of a change request, where the subcontractor, packages up all the things that can be included in a contract change and then sends them over. This is, typically, traditionally, a literal stack of T&M tickets with all the costs and backup information and being included. This can be a pretty manual process. Just envision this giant stack of tickets and having to go and process those. But what we've built, here at Rhumbix, is the ability for a sub to take this stack of tickets, a digital stack now, and combine and transform them into a change order request. It takes the form of a letter, which outlines all the pertinent information: project, contract, T&M scope, descriptions, costs for labor, equipment, materials, even anything kind of externally above and beyond for material and equipment that was used on a particular, a T&M scope. Everything you need for backup, we'll capture that in Rhumbix for you, digitally. And just with a few clicks of a button in Rhumbix, we then convert this into a professionally formatted document. This can then be sent to the GC in a matter of moments. The combination of embedded pricing, to Guy's point, there's a big value add there by including, what is the work going to cost? And the workflows to convert T&M tickets to change orders, saves a huge amount of time and effort that would otherwise be spent on a pretty manual process. We've seen it in the industry. So this is all time that subcontractors can spend on more value added tasks, back on the job site. And ultimately, kind of the end goal here is to help them get paid a lot quicker for the work they're doing. That's what we're looking to accomplish with the T&M process in Rhumbix.